Science will not change conservatives' minds about abortion, and here's why. Hey, I'm Alora. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. I was homeschooled. I went to homeschool group with kids who weren't allowed to wear pants because that would cause the men to fall into lustfulness. Okay, one of those kids. I can't speak for all conservatives, but I'm going to explain what all these arguments on abortion seem to miss. I'm not a conservative anymore. I'm actually pretty leftist. But I grew up in this environment and I realized that some of y'all just don't get it. It all comes down to the concept of a soul. Now, lots of religions and cultures believe that people have a spirit or a soul that's like their spiritual part of their body. I mean, hey, we've all seen ghost movies and all. But for a lot of Christians, it's tied to this idea of being made in the image of God. Essentially, in Genesis, the beginning book of the Bible, God is like, I'm going to make all these animals and stuff. Oh, they're cool, but I want something even cooler. I'm going to make something in the image of God, in the image of me. Something like God, and that's humans. It's essentially the idea that humans are God's selfies. We're not like little gods, but like we're better than other people. Which is why sometimes in Sunday school you'd hear horrible messages like, your cat has ceased to exist now that they're dead because they can't go to heaven because they don't have a soul, so they can never accept Jesus. Side note, everyone interprets the Bible differently, but I don't think that's in there. There's a lot of assumptions made to come to that conclusion. Let me skip ahead. A lot of people, when they say life begins at conception, what they mean is the moment that sperm and egg meet, a soul is breathed into it. Essentially, it doesn't matter how small or insignificant the vessel, it is holding the greatest treasure on earth. Essentially, there is a full person in there. It just needs time to grow. You could call it the X factor. It's the X factor that makes humans humans. In Christian communities, you'll sometimes meet people who have a quote-unquote gift of discernment of spirits. They can discern the spiritual world. Essentially, they know when the vibes are off, but from Jesus. I'm not saying I don't believe in this. I'm just saying I don't believe in it if someone's trying to make money from it. Anyway, people will talk about things like walking into a room where someone's in a coma and just feeling that their spirit had gone. They were already with Jesus. They had left. All that was left is a shell, an empty body, but they were with Jesus. Their spirit, their soul was gone. This is the core of abortion. It is the idea that you can have a shell that has human DNA, but not a human in it. When does the human end up in it? It's not a question of, do you listen to the science? I think the science is very important on this, and it did help me change my mind. But largely the question is, does a fetus, even if it's a single cell, have that X factor? Because if it does, then it is infinitely more precious than anything else on this earth. You should shoot 10 orcas before you take, an abortion. You should kill all the elephants before you end a pregnancy, even if it's 2 weeks along, if there's a soul in it. And I'm making sweeping generalizations. This is a TikTok video. We don't have time to go into what every single conservative thinks. I'm not even a conservative anymore. I'm just trying to give people this perspective because sometimes I see people talking about abortion issues as if it's just so obvious because the science is there. And the issue with this is not, is the science there? It's, is there something beyond science which is more important? Also, a lot of Christians have this idea that God writes a plan for your life before you're born, which really gave me a lot of panic attacks growing up. It's like in those time travel movies where you go back and you change one thing and the whole world is ruined. Imagine that, but with your life, and you have no idea what it's supposed to be, but there's a plan, and if you mess it up, bummer. Panic attack. If you believe that God has a plan for every single soul, and you believe that a soul enters a person, or is created in a person from the moment they are conceived, then every single abortion equals massive butterfly effect on the world we're supposed to have. If you've ever watched significant amount of Star Trek, you can visualize some of the panic there. Now imagine that times millions of abortions. But we're not done yet. There is also this idea that if someone makes a mistake and you didn't try to stop them, the blood is on your hands. It's your fault. I've talked about this before in relation to being gay and people feeling the need to tell me. I just think God wants me to tell you that you're ruining your life. Growing up, I very much felt like I had a responsibility to save the entire world. This is not an accident. This is very much what a lot of churches teach. And if yours didn't, good. But I very much grew up with the idea that if someone was gay near me, I was a little bit gay through osmosis by letting them do it. And since gay was a horrible sin that was ruining the country, I was ruining the country, and then I realized I'm gay, and that was a bummer. So if you believe that from the moment of conception, someone is fully a human, more precious than all of the whales, and someone aborts, then you should have tried to stop them. And you might find yourself thinking, oh, I killed a child. Even if you didn't have the abortion. Your friend had the abortion and you never sat her down randomly at the lunch table to ask her thoughts on life at conception. And the concept of the spiritual realm. And therefore, a child is dead and you kind of did it. Live and let live is not an option in this mental framework because it's always your fault. It's always at least a little bit your fault if things go wrong. This is part of the reason you find some Christians just being completely incapable of minding their business. It's because a lot of Christians have this idea that it's all their business because it's all their fault. Not all Christians think like this. I'm sure I'll get people in the comments being like, I do not have this mindset. Good for you. Some of us aren't there. But we're not done yet. There's also an idea among many Christians that the United States is a Christian nation, born on Christian ideals, and that we're kind of like the new Israel. And in the Bible, when Israel was sinful, God had her invaded by terrible warriors who would hurt them all in awful ways, which I got described to me in vivid detail as a child. Maybe it wasn't vivid detail. Maybe I just had vivid imagination, but it was in some form of detail. So put two and two together. We are a Christian nation, and if we sin too much, we'll be invaded. As a child, I was worried that me having gay thoughts might contribute to my family being murdered by ISIS. Like, I knew it wasn't probably the most rational fear, but it definitely did concern me that I could be a drop in the bucket to the downfall of the Holy Land of America. It wasn't always a step-by-step process like that. I was not sitting down as a child thinking, oh, perhaps lesbianism twilt murder everyone. It was more like, oh, this is bad. And in the back of my head, I knew it was bad because the stakes were so high. It's not always point A to point B. You have built up a massive framework in certain Christian communities and versions of Christianity where there is no such thing as a low stakes decision. Everything could ruin everything. So you put all this together and what you get is, oh, your sister had an abortion. That makes her a murderer and you a murderer and the country in danger and the world screwed, potentially. I'm just describing the perspective I had growing up, which was often very explicitly described to me. A very common saying is, well, what if that fetus you aborted grew up to cure cancer? Like it's the butterfly effect idea of God writing a plan for your life. Not always. Everyone's different. Have I given enough disclaimers here? I am trying to not speak for everyone, but I guarantee you I'm speaking for a decent amount. What made the difference for me is just breaking down these ideas. I realized that the idea that your life is planned out before you and you have to get everything right is really toxic, and I don't think that's in the Bible. I also realized that the concept of souls coming into your body at conception, I don't think is in the Bible either. What made the difference for me in the end was, yes, hearing more about different people's perspectives and troubles, because that made me realize that I probably was missing something. If so much of the science and different people's experiences and statistics seem to indicate that abortion is necessary and good, then what was I missing? But what made the real difference was just coming to the conclusion that I just don't think there's evidence in the Bible that that specific moment a soul appears. Anyway, hope this was educational.